Welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Petty and Ill-Informed podcast, where we discuss things in a petty and ill-informed fashion. Joining me, as always, Kevin
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
and Tom.
Good evening, people.
We have zero viewers. It hasn't happened
Good
in
evening, people.
ages.
That we have zero viewers.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, well.
it's the 4th of July weekend.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I mean, and everybody's out having fun, So
No,
the way
I'm
I
not
look
sure.
at, well,
I'm not sure I'd listen to myself if you paid me. So
Oh, come on! You tell me you don't listen to it afterwards?
I did listen to the end of last week,
Oh,
actually,
he listened to the end of the last, just so he could,
just to check if
because
I.
he was mad with Parr. and
No,
he just said,
no.
He sat down in one of them James Bond villain big leather chairs, stroking his cat, drinking a glass of Chianti, smoking a cigar, listening to him telling you to shut up like 5 or 10 times.
yeah, on loop.
On loop, yeah.
Actually, I wanted to I
When-
wanted to see whether or not I was how I'd been out of order, or if people had tried to end it. And yeah, I had a couple of times, and Richard had a couple of times, well, definitely once. And yeah, I just had I just needed to go somewhere else online.
Oh, no, that's fine. I look at it just like typical English man trying to tell people from Ireland, shut up.
Oh, don't bring the history of our nations into this. We'll be here all night.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm not going to report you. I'm not going to report you to the Anglo-Irish relationship board.
Oh well. Okay, so Richard, your show. Take it away, man.
So Tom had an interesting idea for this week's, and he suggested, what was it, that where if you could go to any point in history only once, where would you go? And I thought that bared talking about.
Yeah, I just thought that would be something fun and just interesting, and we'd hopefully all come up with different things. Anyone want to go first?
Well, I think interestingly enough, I mean, I would have to say, would you not? I mean, I would have to say I'd want to see if Jesus was real, was a real person, and if he was, I'd like to talk to him. So I have to pick out. So do I have to pick out like a certain point in time?
Well, it's up to you. I mean, that's already a very interesting answer, and it's up to you at what point. I mean, would you go to 3 days off? Would you go to the crucifixion? If we're making the rules, you can hang out for 3 days to find out, to see who moved the stone.
Well, I think that I wouldn't necessarily believe that. I mean, because I think that would be such a tragedy. I would really rather sort of see something like the water into wine, sort of 5 loaves and fishes and all that.
The feeding of the 5,000.
Yeah, I would rather do that, because at that point in time, I would feel like, okay, I get the gen. Then I know whether he was the real deal or not. And then that way I wouldn't have to see the tragedy of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think that would be, I think that would be a pretty interesting thing. That's what I would like to see. I mean, from my standpoint, obviously, a lot of people have a faith answer to that. So I don't know, but then at the same time, man, you could be so sort of, I don't know. Would that be a blessing or a curse to meet Jesus? I don't know. It's an interesting thing to say, because if you If you then came to the present time and then sort of said this is what Jesus would have wanted, then I don't know if that's. But I suppose the big argument is, are we doing what Jesus really wanted anyway?
Well, actually, it's really interesting you say that, because I thought to myself, years ago when I used to be a Christian, I used to think, I wonder if you could go back in time and, get a one-way ticket with the Doctor in his TARDIS or something to go and find out, would you? And then I thought, oh, damn it, hang on, this is where I'm supposed to say, oh, I've already got faith, I don't need to go and visit. Damn, I can't. So I couldn't even entertain the thought. Now I look at the same situation very differently, because I'm not a Christian, but I've got many friends who are. And my thought is, like, even if I could have that knowledge, definitive, certain knowledge about the level of accuracy of the entire gospel, what would I do with it? And the answer is, I wouldn't want to know, because I wouldn't want to do anything with the information. So I wouldn't want to know it and keep it a secret. Basically, so many people have this faith, and regardless of what I believe about Christianity, at Hannah's church, I go as well, and I take our kids to it. They're a community of people that really help each other out, and I would not want to take that apart. No one would believe me anyway. So I wouldn't want to, want to come back and say, "Oh, guys, I went with the Doctor back in time, and no, Jesus, he was." This bits are true, but sadly, no, he once he was executed, that was it. Sorry, guys, sorry to disappoint you. Well, do you do that? Of course you don't. So I wouldn't even want to know. So I think, Kevin, you've asked a very, very interesting question.
Well, I think what's interesting about that, Tom, is from the standpoint of that, I was reading something that said, from the standpoint of biblical knowledge today, in America anyway, it basically said that a lot of sort of not anti-Christians, but sort of people who were Christians and then fell away from the faith actually knew more about the Bible than people who were practicing Christians. It was an interesting sort of point to know that, like people who were agnostic or no longer atheistic or whatever actually had a better grasp of what was in the Bible than people who were practicing Christians. But I do believe what you say, that people who are Christians and help each other out and are community based and those types of things. I find that to be heartening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I would tend to believe that people would like. But sometimes, on the other hand, as you know, some people are Christians and that they use that as a reason to tell other people what to do. And I don't think that that's necessary. I mean, that's not my cup of tea. So
no.
Well, what I find is interesting of it is that there are sort of different schools of thought about Christianity, and I don't know if say for example, there was this idea of Celtic Christianity for a long time. Sort of this idea of sort of almost like Jesus. And if you look at old art and things like that, you can also almost see this. Jesus is depicted as like sort of almost a young Harry Potter character with a magic wand. This was some of the very first depictions of Jesus Christ was like that, and so like he was a magician, and I don't know. But as time changes, the depictions change, and so as we've come through that, so it's very interesting to me to see how it would have been, whether he would have been sort of, Jesus a magician type thing, and to see that, that sort of thing. And if you find that to be true, how I would bet that you would almost be put to death, even in today's time, if you came back and said, "Oh, this is really how he was." You know what I mean? This first, but some of the very first depictions of Jesus was like that, very young, fresh faced character, almost the. Anyway, but I can't imagine that that would be a very popular depiction anymore. But
So,
anyway.
so
He's always
Kevin,
white as well.
I don't think that's true. I
No,
don't think.
he would not have been white. It's Middle East.
No, and I don't think back then that they. If you, I can't remember um, who the art historian was who did a pretty good program on the history of art and Christianity and how it had changed. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry, but I'll look it up for next week. But what is interesting about it is, he was curly haired and everything like that, and he was depicted that way. And of course, the idea of the straight haired white man with blue eyes is,
mm,
is definitely aspirational, because that wouldn't have been biblical, of course.
what's one thing that's really interesting is in the film Ben-Hur, they deliberately never show his face.
Right.
But I think when you see him from a distance, I think he's still he may or may not be portrayed as a white man. Actually, I'm not sure, but it's a very interesting take on it. I watched the film recently, Ben-Hur. We studied the Romans at school, and so I watched that. So I've nearly fallen down a rabbit hole in a different direction, but no, it's all they do is they never say it's Jesus. All that happens is they just play this certain very peaceful, spiritual sounding bit of score whenever
Right.
it's a Jesus moment, and it's yes, it works. It just works, regardless of what you feel about the whole gospel and the idea. It's a lovely emotional moment in the film whenever that happens.
Right. And you couldn't, you couldn't describe, Charlton Heston as the prototypical Jew either. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah, he was blonde. He was blue-eyed and everything like that. But that's the interesting thing. Well, I really like Ben-Hur as a movie. I do like it. It's a good film, I thought.
Yeah, I've got I've something quite funny. I'm pretty sure I saw this because I still buy Blu-rays and DVDs because I actually really like all the extras, geek alert that I am. And there was this one about the making of the 1925 edition, and the amount of horses that died was appalling. It's less substantiated how many horses, if any, died in the 1959 one, but in the 1925 one, loads of horses died. And they are not sure, they can't promise that no extras died, because on the scene where they set a galley on fire, the ship was loaded with extras. And the fire raged very quickly, a lot more than anyone anticipated. And all these extras are jumping into the water. And of course, the full extent of health and safety checks were, can you swim? Because you're not getting this gig if you can't. And they say, yes. And they probably didn't keep a proper record or a proper head count or anything like that. Or, the paperwork would have been minimal. And they can't promise that extras didn't just jump into the sea and drown and sink.
Yeah.
With a different time, Tom.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure that's that happened. But anyway, yeah. So what? Just quickly, Kevin, to finish your point, how do you imagine a conversation with our Lord and Savior would go?
Well, that's the interesting part. When you Um, well, I think from that standpoint, I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily want to uh, have a conversation with him as much as just observe
Ah,
the situation, simply because of the fact that obviously just the observation of it and seeing how he reacted to other people would be the thing for
hmm.
that. Uh, you know, because I mean, if he was totally charismatic, um, I think you could, I think you could see that. But again, this would be the one of those things where, obviously at the time of this, Jesus wasn't thought of as the only Messiah at the time. And there was multiple people that were thought of as the Messiah during that time.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, I mean there were and so this is the thing.
Oh, what they don't teach you at Sunday school.
No, no, but historically speaking, and he was not the first Messiah, quote unquote, to be killed in Jerusalem either. But there were several people. Well, and one of them, interesting enough, was just called the Egyptian, and so that, I mean that's but it's I
What
think
is that?
what that buzzing noise.
Yeah.
It's,
Jesus
I think it's
Christ.
Richard. It's Richard's mic.
What's he doing? Farting down a kazoo.
No, it's just there's an electrical problem. It's an old mic. The wires are loose, probably.
Yeah, but that's it. I mean that would be what I would. Well,
Okay.
I want to know. Yeah.
Richard, do you want to take it away?
2013.
2013.
Yeah, that's where I'd go back in time to.
You could see Andy Murray win Wimbledon for the first time all over again.
No, I don't care about Andy Murray. I want to go back in time to 2013, and the minute Edward Snowden finishes releasing the last of his leaks, I want to come up behind him and strangle him to death and say "Hail Hydra" in his ear before he dies.
Hey, and
I thought maybe it was the first time you had it off with a woman or something.
Nope, that's what I want to do.
And
So,
and
okay,
and
tell
why?
us more.
Yeah, why Edward Snowden? And why do you think that he
It'd
deserves?
be hilarious. Just you know, he thinks he's there releasing all this information to the public, thinking he's getting away with it. Hail Hydra as well. I mean, so random. It's brilliant. I love it.
Well, it is interesting that Snowden he ends up in Russia, uh, uh, and we um, for it is interesting that and this is just a quick aside, but that lady that there was a lady that's a basketball player that's going through the uh, the system now because apparently they find some cannabis oil or hashish oil or something like that in one of her vape cartridges or something like that. And so there's a 99.9% chance that she's going to be convicted under the Russian, um, you know, just jury system or justice system, and she's going to be put in jail for up to 10 years. Well, basically, they're going to use her to swap between some Russian dude and her. They'll use her to it's like a sort of a swap. But it's interesting that even though we're having the the struggles with Russia, they're not getting rid of old Snowden. You know what I mean? At no point in time have they ever said, "Here, do you want him back?" And I can't imagine that they really have that much. Why would they hold him in any kind of esteem at all? Why would they do it? It seems to me like unless the Russians got something out of it, why would they even care what happened to Edward Snowden? Why wouldn't they just kick him to the curb on the border with Finland and say, "Here, have the guy back"?
They could drop him in Ukraine.
Yeah. Why wouldn't they just do that?
They're heading there anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is the thing that would lead. This was the thing that would lead me to believe at that point in time they're not dumping him somewhere because they owe him.
For the benefit of ill-informed people such as myself, would you care, Richard, to give us a lowdown on Edward Snowden and the tale of which you speak?
He was an NSA operative that's dumped a load of classified information on WikiLeaks.
Okay, and to further compound my ignorance, though, that initialism, NSA,
National Security Agency.
okay,
It's like the CIA of the jocks of secret operations and the NSA of the nerds.
Yeah.
okay,
So the I think the NSA is more of a, you know, they're more of a computer type system that's overlooking the, you know, like the you know what's happening on the net. So basically at one point in time there's a, you know, digital intelligence and sort of that would be the NSA, and sort of physical intelligence and would be sort of the CIA. In other words, you're sending out a guy to collect intelligence in the CIA, and in the NSA you're using sort of passive intelligence gathering by looking at the you know, computer traffic and then other people's things to see what it was. And the thing that I think was disturbing to Edward Snowden was the amount of things that were going through the government system to find, you know, to find, I mean, how much you were actually being surveilled by the government, which was
Nobody
probably
likes a snitch, Kevin.
well, yeah. Well, I and I'm going to say this: it was probably, and still is probably, less than you're being surveilled on Facebook.
Yeah, private companies survey you way more than the government does.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, in the long on the long thing about, you know, it's so, interestingly enough, doesn't really matter. I don't know. If you want to be
Pretty sure
upset,
even the American government doesn't care about Snowden anymore.
yeah.
I mean, that was what, 3 presidents ago?
Yeah.
So where is he now?
Russia.
Yeah, someplace in
Rotting
Moscow.
inside a Siberian gulag.
No,
He's living in an apartment.
he's like that dude from the 50s, guy, what's his face, that defected to the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Yeah, there was lots of British spies at the back there in the 50s.
Ended up, you know, dying of alcohol poisoning by himself in a flat in Moscow. Rather sad.
Well, pretty much a lot of Cambridge people and Oxford people ended up there because because this is the thing that I find interesting. It's the law of unintended consequences that the spies that ended up going to the British spies that ended up going to Russia in the 50s defected to Russia and became spies for the KGB because they were gay, and it was against the law in Britain to be gay, so they could be prosecuted for being gay. Same reason that you know, the guy with the Enigma machine,
Alan Turing.
Yeah, Alan Turing, you know, ended up
Killed him. Yeah. Committed non-alive to himself.
Right. So again,
that always pissed me off because he like basically helped us win World War II.
Right.
I mean,
but this is the thing, right? So when you look at it from the standpoint of this I mean, obviously, things happen in America, where it seems like, oh well, you're getting back to the to the point where you're starting to clamp down on these different things. Yeah, I mean, be careful what you wish for, because in the end, somebody somebody who's gay might say, okay, well, country doesn't care about me, so I'm just going to give all the information to the Russians and then piss off over to Moscow. And then you'll be like, what the hell happened? What, is he a traitor because he sort of,
Yes,
well, yeah, but at the same,
absolutely a traitor.
yeah, well, that's an
One
interesting question.
thousand percent a traitor.
Yeah, but if you look at it like this, my country doesn't care about me. Do I care about I guess an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, obviously there is the moral obligation that you say, okay, well, this is it. But I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't know the answer.
It's a matter of trust. You can't get in bed with a traitor because you don't know when they'll turn on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
But it's just there's not much else I'd want to do with a time machine, because like you can't change anything because you could make things a shitload worse. Because a lot of people always say, "Oh, if I could go back in time, I'd kill Hitler." But would that make anything better in the long term?
Exactly. I mean, you can easily argue that you change the timeline so massively. I mean, who knows what the world would look like now if it weren't for World War II? I mean, and you can't say there wouldn't have been a World War II because you just don't know. I mean, the resentment against the Weimar Republic grew massively. I mean, it's perfectly possible that someone would
Pulled
have
America out of the Depression.
done. Well, who knows?
Well, interestingly enough, I think if you take away Hitler, then you end up with one person who's a massive egomaniac in the middle, and which
Stalin?
would be Stalin. And I think again, Stalin would have then said, okay, we're going to wait. I think Stalin would have waited 10 more years and then invaded Europe. At that point in time.
Exactly. You can speculate. You don't know.
Yeah.
That hypothesis makes sense,
Right.
because
The
well,
Cold
that
War
was
happened.
the fascinating thing. There is the ideological difference between Nazism and communism, because communism. But basically, they're both different excuses to take over each other. Russia's excuse for wanting to take over Germany is because the proletariat need to spread the revolution, workers
Right.
of the world unite, and all that. Whereas Germany believed in the supremacy of the Aryan race and believed that their entire nation of all classes were superior to the Slav race that Russia supposedly belonged to. So they both had different ideological reasons for wanting to kick the other's ass, and led to the most brutal theatre of war in human history by some massive margin. I mean, from Barbarossa to Berlin, the casualty rates are just catastrophic. Honestly, I don't know the stats, but I know enough to know that it is the bloodiest theatre of war in human history. The Eastern Front, 1941 to 45.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in history, by the way. There's not a lot there's a lot I'm ill-informed about, but this thing happens to be something I dare say I'm not.
Right. And the level of cruelty.
History. What's your opinion about Alexander the Great?
What, mine?
Yeah.
It's not an era of history I know tons about, but he was.
You literally just said you knew everything about history.
Did not say I know everything. You put words into my mouth, you paraphrasing bastard.
Okay, wow.
Well, I mean,
Check out the big balls on Tom.
To be in all fairness to Tom, when you do get a specialization period that you would go through. I mean, like I'm saying, it's not like I have a degree in military history, but that doesn't mean that I know about, um, you know, 5,000 A, BC, that period of time. I mean, it's there's modern history or post 1945.
I
A lot of
mean,
times it's post
what I
1945 or
what I know of
yeah.
Alexander the Great, you could write on a postage stamp. Basically, he was an incredible, uh, inventive, phenomenally, inventive and creative battlefield strategist. Ate the Persians for breakfast as a result. Um, but seemed to be more interested in conquest than governance, and that's about all I know. And he died very young. He
Named
died about
13 cities Alexandria,
yeah,
and
he's
one
great.
city Ascrucian, which was Turkish for Alexandria.
Well, I think but I think Tom's right in the fact that he was, he was a great amasser of territory, but I don't think he was really good at sort of administering it. And definitely the people who came after him were totally shite in it. You know what I mean?
The reason
Like,
I asked about Alexander the Great is because I had another friend called Tom, but he spelled his name with a H,
Hmm.
who was a professor of Latin at Oxford.
Right.
And he absolutely loathed Alexander the Great. If you got him drunk, he would go on these long rants about what an absolute shit cunt Alexander the Great was.
and why was that? Because I mean, you can make that argument about anybody who conquers that much territory. Realistically, you could make the argument about that they were terrible. You know what I mean? I mean, people still make that argument about the British Empire, like they were terrible. But but as far as Alexander the Great, why was he any more? I mean, was he putting him on the same level as sort of a Genghis Khan type thing, or you know?
Well, it's more sort of what happened after the Alexander the Great died. But if you don't know the story, Alexander the Great, he started. I forgot. It begins with an M. It doesn't exist anymore.
Mesopotamia.
Yeah,
Macedonia.
Macedonia, one of them
Oh,
places.
yeah.
And he just worked his way east and conquered every country he came across until they got to the River Ganges, and his men mutinied against him and refused to go any further.
Yeah.
Literally, they were just sick of winning. And after that, they poisoned him and he died. And he died without naming a successor. So all of his generals basically spent the next 30 years fighting over the countries he'd conquered. So he created this situation where it just led to a bunch of civil wars and a lot of deaths and a lot of destruction. And he named 13 cities after himself. Well, 14.
So basically, he's saying that the guy was terrible because he died without a will.
Yeah, basically, he said he didn't like him because he hadn't planned for his death. But Alexander the Great was in his 20s when he died. I mean,
Yeah.
that was old back then. But
Well, I mean, I thought a lot of people didn't like him because, he was, obviously, he went to Egypt and then he wanted to go see what do you call that? The soothsayer, or what do you call that? The oracle that was in the middle of the desert.
Oracle of Delphi.
Not in Delphi itself, though. It wasn't in Delphi. It was in the middle of the desert in Egypt. So he goes out there, meets that person, decides that he's sort of this semi-divine creature or a person, as with a lot of people they did. But anyway, so that was the thing that I think is interesting is that, from the standpoint of it seems to me like he was, full of the ego. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, is that, in order to do that, do you have to have an inordinate amount of ego? I mean, obviously, sort of Julius Caesar did. I mean, uh, is it? I don't know.
Julius Caesar had a massive opinion of it. Have you ever read his war diaries? It's insane. But he's like, Caesar took to the field with a rippling six pack. The sunlight glistened off his hair, and he looked truly boss.
Well, I mean
Caesar-
that like the whole Vercingetorix type, thing at what was that?
Alesia,
Yeah,
my
the Elysian
favorite battle
Fields,
in
yeah.
Roman history.
I mean, that idea of the sort of I'm going to show up, build a wall to encircle these folks, and then
He
realize,
literally sieged himself. It was brilliant.
yeah, and then build a wall the other way.
Yeah, when
about-
Vercingetorix's reinforcements turned up, he built another wall. And they're
Yeah.
just like, yeah, we'll just keep building walls, motherfucker. We can do this all time. We're fucking Romans.
But what I don't understand, I mean, like I said, that idea of that, the fact that the timing worked out was massive. Was massive. You know what I mean?
Oh, it came down to the wire because like they had to take the city before Vercingetorix's heavy cavalry broke through the wall, and they managed it. And it's just like, yeah, okay, well
Yeah.
done.
But I mean, I would have loved to have seen, some kind of an interpretation of the history of it that wasn't all Roman. You know what I mean? Just to see what was going on. 'Cause obviously, I don't think that there was anybody left in, Alesia to tell what had happened. You know what I
Now,
mean?
Vercingetorix's forces kicked all the civilians out.
Oh wait, yeah. No, wait, but Vercingetorix was taken back to Rome. Oh, that's right. And then he was killed in Rome. So
Yeah, he was hung, drawn, and quartered
yeah, there
after
was
apologizing to Caesar.
yeah, there was a massive amount of slaves taken from the battle. So
Yeah.
But I don't imagine anybody was sitting there next to them with a quill and a piece of paper saying, "What do you think? What do you, what's your interpretation of it?" But anyway,
Anyway, where would you go, Tom?
Me, right. It's a bit of an obvious one, but it just for pure fascination and interest, I would be. Let me just find the exact historic details. I would be on the 14th of April, the year. Oh, surely I know this. Yeah, 14th of April, 1912, 11:30 p.m. on a ship
Titanic, really?
in the North Atlantic. Yes, I would. I would want to be on the right on the as far forward where Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet are in that stupid pose when they kiss. That point, and just to look and see. I wouldn't interfere. I wouldn't change anything. And after the impact, I'd just slip quietly off into my TARDIS and fuck off. But just to see just how invisible was that iceberg. Could it have been seen? Were they just prattling about up there like they are in the film and taking their eyes off the ball? Or was it really the everything, the worst possible circumstances of cloud blocking the moon, very little breeze, and almost, crystal, almost, glass-like ocean, that sort of thing, and just be there. I'd have to bloody wrap up warm, but just to be there and just to see it, just to see that godforsaken iceberg coming. And would I change it? Well, again, you can't say. Would I shout, "Oi, look out, boys! What the fuck?" No, you couldn't, because I mean, how loads of laws, because human beings generally learn their lessons the hard way, and that was how we learnt the lesson that you need to have the right bloody number of lifeboats on a ship for them to match the number of crew and passengers. and there would have probably just been another accident that could have been far more costly and loss of life that would have just delayed safe, safety on ships. That could, yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, it so maybe sounds a bit morbid, but it's because that happened. That ship just was going straight in towards the path of an iceberg, and they didn't have their binoculars up in the crow's nest. That much is known. But yeah, just how invisible was that behemoth? Yeah, that's what I mean, the whole ruddy ship just wasn't designed at all to dodge things. Those things weren't. I mean, they're getting very big by then, and they turn by the rear, not even by the bow. The way a keel works, it turns behind the propeller, and that pushes that end outwards. So even as they were trying to turn, they're just pushing their rear end more into its path. There's nothing that could have been done really. Anyway, just to see it, just to see that thing looming in the distance, and just to be there in a way. I don't know. It sounds maybe it is morbid as fuck. Who knows? But you just
it's insanely morbid.
Well, what does that say about me and my dark subconscious?
So incredibly boring as well.
No,
well, I don't. I mean, I think it's interesting to do it, but to talk about it. But what I find is interesting about it is that we all think now that these guys knew what they were doing. But to be honest with you, in a certain degree, it's not like they had a way to simulate. I mean, like with flight simulators, now you'd say, okay, this is the issue. Try to fix it. Try to with these things. These guys didn't. You're talking about a ship which apparently, had a rudder that. Now you could figure it out that the rudder for the Titanic was too small for the ship. You know what I mean? And the actual fact that then they put the ship engines in reverse, which then actually takes all the steering ability away from the rudder. So it seemed like the way that they actually handled it was the worst possible way of doing it. That if they would have just left it going forward and then steered as far as they could, because there was three propellers, and if they would have obviously turned the rudder away from the iceberg, and then cut the other two engines and just the one away from it, that might have done it. But I don't know. But the issue is that nobody would have known that, because there's no way of simulating that back in the day.
You know what? Go on, finish, Kevin. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, and I'm just saying, because even whenever you're looking at that, I mean, when the two ships were the Olympic and the Titanic, when they were in the sort of slipways in Belfast and all that, I think that the two of them almost ran into each other in the middle of the lock in Belfast, because they were hard to maneuver. But it's as far as that goes, it seems to me like they knew it was very, very difficult to maneuver those different types of things. And the old idea that there is this kind of iceberg called a blue iceberg, and it would be interesting to find out if that's what that is. But a blue iceberg actually is very, very difficult to see, because they it's literally like a dark blue color. You can look it up. Sometimes it's rare, but you can see sometimes what's called a blue iceberg.
One rare type of iceberg I encountered was just in a BBC News article. There was an iceberg captured in a photograph where, as it had melted gradually, it had, quite unusually for an iceberg, it had become a bit top heavy, and the whole thing tilted in the water. And a part that had been submerged for ages went onto the surface, and so it's not been attacked by the weather at all. And it's completely there's no snow on it, or anything, and it's completely clear. It's like the largest ice cube you've ever seen, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'll find that if I can and post it in the chat, because that was just this inverted ice cube. And autobiographically, interestingly, is a matter of subjective matter whether my music is interesting. When I made my record, I had a song called Icebreaker, and I used that. I pinched that image from the BBC and ruthlessly plagiarized it without even quoting my source. What a complete bastard! And I call myself a history student, and I used that as the background for the song Icebreaker in the inlay card for the CD.
That's
Pretty
interesting.
cute. Do you know that the sister ship to the Titanic sunk as well?
World War II, wasn't it?
That was in World War One. It sank off Greece. It was hit by a mine. Yeah, the Britannic. Yeah.
And there was a member of the cabin crew that was on both ships.
Yeah. That's
Can you
true.
imagine that? But during the second one, do you think she was just like rolling her eyes at everyone else, being like, fucking noobs?
I don't know. I mean, but I I would think that you would think to yourself, man, this is this is terrible. I mean, I don't know. What would you do? How would you feel if you were on two ships like that? I mean, I think so. Because there was three ships, there was the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic.
Yeah.
But if the Titanic had sank and then the Britannic had sank and they came to pick you up in the Olympic and said, okay, we're going to take you home, which
be like, nah, I'll swim. It's all right.
I could have sworn that let's see what happened to what was the fate of the Olympic?
Well, I think the Olympic was...
That's actually the subject of a massive conspircy theory, because some people think that the Olympic sunk, not the Titanic, and it was an insurance.
Really?
I have heard that.
Well, I think what's interesting about it, I think that a lot of the sort of interior furnishings from the Olympic ended up being sold off and things like that. But a lot of people don't know this, that a lot of the interior woodwork of the Belfast City Hall was done by the same people who did the wood interiors of the Titanic, those three ships. And so, it's, if you want a very good example of the way that the woodwork would have looked on the Titanic, if you go to the Belfast City Hall and take a tour or something like that, there's actually pretty good representation of how some of the fittings on the Titanic would have looked. So a lot of people don't know that. Well, I suppose that was in a long time. They didn't want people poking around in the Belfast City Hall, but no, I don't think it's so bad. But
when it comes to the Titanic, there's two things we can agree on. One, it was a great tragedy, and two, there was room on that door for both of them.
Oh, definitely. There was no reason for Old Rose to push him down into the water. Now that was that. That's for sure. But that's the way it is.
What do you think is worse, going down on the Titanic or ending up like the Terror in the Erebus?
Ooh. Oh, we talked about that a little while ago, didn't we?
Well, I think that, you know, I mean, realistically speaking, if you went into the water from the Titanic and it's that cold, you would die of hypothermia. The average person would have died of hypothermia within, you know, being in the water maybe 5 minutes. I mean, so I mean, the way I look at it is, if you're going to die, I would imagine that the shortest time possible would be there, because obviously after a certain period of time you stop feeling
Yeah.
the pain and everything like that.
Yeah, interestingly, as a closing thought, you know, if the doctor said to me, "Too bad, Arnold, you know, you wanted to witness this shit, now you got to live it, motherfucker," and dived into the TARDIS and left me to my fate, assuming I didn't manage to blag my way onto one of the spare spaces in one of the early lifeboats, knowing what I know, that everyone was gonna, the whole bloody ship was gonna end up at the bottom of the Atlantic. Assuming if that was to be my end, I would, like Mr. Guggenheim, who says, "But we would like a brandy." I wouldn't be having one shot. I would be so fucking absolutely blitzed off my tits that I would be absolutely oblivious anyway. And then I would, to be honest, as ways to go are, I think hypothermia, you would be in that sea, you would feel excruciating cold, but your body will go completely numb as you're it's not pleasant. Well, no death is pleasant, but what happens is your body pulls all of your blood out of your extremities to desperately try and preserve heat on your body's core and your internal organs. It ups the metabolism massively, which is why you're shaking like hell to burn energy and generate heat. But then that's what causes frostbite. You see, it's your body pulling blood away from your extremities, and they've not got enough nutrition and stuff, and all the fluids stop moving and they freeze. That's what causes frostbite. It's your body's response to the cold, and it's your body's your body's way of telling you you're bloody stupid to have got yourself in this situation. Get out. But then eventually, of course, I mean, water. Nothing sucks heat out of you like water. I mean, water has a very, very high specific heat capacity, or very, very low, one or the other. But I think it's high. Yes, it's very high, i.e. it takes an awful lot of heat water can absorb huge amounts of heat before its temperature really rises. And that's the key to water. That's why it's used for putting out fires. And that's why it's used for sweat, because when it evaporates, that takes a lot of energy to do that, and takes heat energy away from your body as it goes from water to gas, liquid to gas on your skin. And it will that cold water will pull heat out of you like nothing else. And you'd just go into unconsciousness as as everything just cools down and shuts down. You just slip into unconsciousness. And there are, I dare say, probably worse ways to go as ways to go.
But before we wrap things up, I just want to address one quick point here, Tom. You said that if you managed to blag your way onto one of the lifeboats, if the doctor just abandoned me there on the Titanic, I would get a lifeboat there and then. You know, I wouldn't wait for the iceberg. I'd be like, I'm just popping out on maybe sometime.
A launch collapsible D before anything else is even.
Yeah, exactly. Just get out of there now and then. You know, why wait for the iceberg?
Yeah, take a brandy and a cigar with you, and just park up and watch from afar. Watch the carnage unfold. Why not?
Exactly.
Oh, you're a special guy, Richard.
Well, if you know it's coming, you get out of there. You know.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, oh, blimey. I just find it.
What? Blimey, what? What's the alternative? Freezing to death?
No. Yeah. the gruesome scientific process I just described.
Yeah, exactly. Grab a lifeboat there and then.
Yeah. Kevin, you're on the Titanic at the moment of the impact. What are your thoughts?
Well, I suppose, interestingly enough, I think. Well, I don't know. The Titanic thing to me is close. Obviously, some of the people, the guy, one of the people that was in charge of, the Harlan and Wolff um, shipyard was from the village that I grew up in.
That
Thomas.
explains so much.
Well, no, I mean, that's Thomas Andrews' father used to come into the shop, that my grandfather owned. It's so it is. I mean, he was from the neighboring village over. So, it's an interesting thing. I think that in a lot of ways, had I lived at that time and been back there, I would have figured that it would have been my duty. And I think that that's true even now. I mean, being the fact that, I mean, I've never been afraid of death. I've just been afraid of dying because it hurts.
Oh,
It
that's
hurts. You know what I mean?
interesting. I've not heard that spoken before, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so
Yeah, I agree.
I think that I would have tried to help as many people as they could have, because from that standpoint, um, from that, you know, I just don't. I would have. I really think that I would have bought into the ideas of women and children first and all that stuff. I mean, I'm still of that generation where that was sort of the idea of it. I mean, and that's the interesting part of do you think that a 20-year-old would think that way now versus a 50-year-old that I am? And I think that maybe Northern Irish people are like 20 years behind everybody anyway. So, that sort of idea of that. I mean, that's an interesting.
Women and children. Listen, man. Okay, this isn't the 1950s. Women have suffered for a long time to get equal rights, and the least we can do is not give them first dibs at a lifeboat to
Yeah,
show
but
that they are
mean,
equal.
I understand it, but you see, but the question with it is, again, it's kind of this interesting sort of this take on life, in the fact that women and children are the hope for the future, and women can have more children. So women, so in a weird way, it's that's the issue. You know what I mean? That sort of idea that men are expandable because of the fact that we can't create life the way that women can. I don't mean I don't know, bro. I'm just digging myself a hole here.
No, I take children as well. They're easy to overpower when the food runs out. So.
Well,
I'm just being practical.
Yeah,
right?
well, I mean,
if
that's
you know you're going to be in a life or death situation,
they still got a little bit of baby fat on them, and they're not so stringy whenever you're eating them.
Exactly. Not so aged, not so lean, nice and tender. Just saying, if you know you're going to be in a survival situation, have a couple of kids with you.
And on that delightful note of cannibalism and infanticide.
Oh my God! Look, man, it's been done in history numerous times. The Donner Party, the people on the Wessex. Just saying. Children are always the first to be eaten in a survival situation.
Oh dear.
See, I think that just before we go, before you shut it off, I mean, the whole idea why nobody has opened a kebab shop on Donner Pass is just beyond me.
It should be done. Someone should do it.
Somebody needs to open a shop up there called Donner Kebab.
I still can't believe there's a picnic site. Now, I've got a really dark, twisted sense of humor, and even I'm like, really?
That's pretty special.
All right, well, that'll wrap us up for this week. We will return next week, despite the hopes of many, where Nikki better be back. Well, I'm going to have serious words with her. It's good night from me, and it's good night from Kevin and Tom. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Cheers.